Hello, this is Dead Hamster, and this is Chapter 8 in the new tutorial series covering the new features available in the Tarmac 5 editing kit. In this chapter, we're going to take a look at the object editor, which allows you to create new custom objects for Mario Kart 64. So, taking a look in here, we're going to create the model for this object first. This model is going to be a very basic barrel type object, so we're going to create a cylinder and stretch it up. We'll make it 60 units across, 125 units tall. As always for our objects, we want to make sure they're at 0 with no rotation, that the scaling stays at 100. And from there we can convert it to a mesh. Start editing our actual object. So we'll take the bottom verts and drag them down to -5. This way when we place them into the level, it'll sink a little bit below the surface and it'll set a bit into the dirt or the whatever object we're placing it on. We do need a texture, just like all of our materials. It does have to apply to the normal texture rules, the dimensions, the transparency levels, things like that. We'll do our UV map. There we go. Okay, and there's our barrel. Very simple, not a complex object, but just something to bump into. We'll take a box over here. And we're going to call this Master Objects. Very similar to how when we exported a course, we had the object Course Master Objects. This will be the parent to what our barrel is assigned to. We again have to split it by material, so if you have multiple materials, make sure to split so that each object is in its own material. In this case, we only have one, so that's not a concern. We're going to assign it to the parent here, and then we'll export. You can see I already did. I'll delete this old one. We'll export the barrel model. So we now need to go in and load our object type compiler. When that comes up, the name will be barrel, and we're going to load our model. It comes up with this message again. I had covered this in a previous chapter when going over the textures. This is okay in most scenarios. If one of your actual materials is unavailable, that will obviously pose an issue, but there's a default material that gets applied to objects, such as this box here. If that material has an issue, that's not a concern. You could see our texture, a 32 by 64 wood texture here. I'm not going to use any type of fancy wrapping modes or scrolling textures. The barrel will just stay static. Over here, there's quite a few settings that we'll need to adjust. The scale will be 0.1. Now, when we built our barrel, we built it about 125 units tall, about 60 units across. What we actually want is a barrel about 12 units tall and about 6 units across. That's roughly the size of a player in game. However, the models are limited to whole number values for their vert positions. Because they're stored as integers, you can't store a fractional value like 10.2 or 10.5. It has to go straight from 10 to 11. So by using a larger object and scaling it down, we're able to get more complexity and end up using those fractional values even though we still store them as whole numbers. So in our case, the scale is 10. We want it to be 10 times smaller. So we're going to use 1/10, 0.1, in order to scale it down. The speed value is used for the chase behavior, the search behavior rather. We're going to be using rotate, so speed isn't going to be used. We won't need to worry about speed. Status is what happens when you hit the object and collide with it in-game. You can be flattened, you could become a bomb, there might be a mushroom boost, perhaps you create a mushroom item and place that throughout the level. There's a lot of options in here to turn on different things. Map object hit will be a common one. and the green shell hit or red shell hits will also be common. With the map object hit, that will send you straight up and straight back down. This can cause an issue for static objects such as a barrel, because if I go straight up and straight back down, I'm going to hit the barrel again. So we'll want to leave this on green shell hit, and that should help alleviate some of that issue. You might still get stuck if you're driving very slow, but hopefully this won't happen. Effects are additional visual effects that'll show up when you get hit. We'll go ahead and do crash. So there should be the word crash that appears if this is working. Range is the distance that they'll travel in search or wander mode, not relevant to rotate. Sight is how far away they can see a player when in search mode. Again, not relevant in this case, so we don't need to worry about that for rotate. The view is the angle that they look at, again, in search mode when searching for a player, not relevant for rotate. Collision will be the width of the collision box. In our case, we want it to be a 6 for 6 units across. The render radius is how far away the barrels will get drawn. We're going to turn this up to 300. 100 is actually a little bit too small. And then the hitbox is, again, the same thing, how far away. Now the hitbox, I believe, is actually for the calculations with movement. So, correction, collision is the calculations with movement. Hitbox is the player calculations. So for when the searching is wandering across a level and going up or downhill, there's a calculation that will allow it to stay within the level geometry and not fall out of bounds. The collision is what the radius is on that floating value, so to speak, that keeps them in bounds. So you'll want that to be roughly the same size as the actual model, whereas the hitbox you might want to be a little bit larger so that even if the player doesn't quite hit the object, they still collide with it. And that's up to your personal designs with the object. A sound is a sound that will play when you're near the object. We'll go ahead and go with a whole lot to choose from. These use the official names, so they're not exactly with boat horns. The sound range is how far away the sound will play. And then the sound type, you usually want to choose local if it's available. Okay, that should be all the options we need to set to create this barrel object. We'll now hit the Build Object button, and we'll save the OK64 object file as a barrel. From here, if we were to go into our course compiler and load our FBX file, we can go to the last tab, the Objects tab, and we'll be adding this in for the next chapter, where we'll go over this in detail. But for right now, you can see our barrel scaled down to the appropriate size, and this is what it will look like in game. Again, we're going to cover this in the next chapter, Chapter 9. We're going to cover the Objects tab. Until then, as always, thank you, and you guys take care.